I love Jesus, but I want to show that He's Lord of my life. I need to show Him. I need to show myself. Francis Chan gave away a lot of money. He quit the huge church he had built from scratch. He took his family to places where no one knew his name. People thought he was the most radical preacher in the United States for many years. But then he started going out with people whose fans didn't trust him. People accused him of teaching about communion. He didn't expect his house church movement to have so much trouble, and the stress on his family became too much to ignore. I believe that leaders, like me, get a lot of feedback on everything they say. That man who told everyone else how to live for God is now 58 years old and having doubts about his own way of life. Nobody thought the replies would be what they were. Francis Chan lost someone early in life, before he even knew what loss meant. He was born in a small flat in New York City's Chinatown on August 31, 1967. And as soon as he came into the world, his mother left it. During labor, she bled a lot and never got better. That baby cried next to a body that would never hold him. As a child, he heard stories about her but never really saw her because there wasn't a single picture of her in the family photos. He looked for music for years but couldn't find anything. Later, the only pictures he could find were old government photos from Hong Kong. They showed a young woman whose face seemed both familiar and far away. His father, who played music, had to raise 3 young children by himself in a country that still felt strange. Because of that duty, the house became a heavy and quiet spot where life was more important than comfort. Francis used to wonder how a loving God could let someone start a life with such a high cost. Not long after that, his dad could no longer handle the stress by himself. And Francis, music, was sent to live with his grandmother in Hong Kong when he was a little boy. It was like waking up in a different world after the move. The streets of America were not there for him. Instead, he found himself in a small room smelling of incense and hearing prayers being said in a language that seemed old and strange. Because his grandma was very religious, she filled the house with rituals that he didn't understand. She burnt paper gifts for the dead and told him that ghosts were watching everything he did. He went with her into temples and watched her bow and chant while golden statues, music, stared down at her in quiet. He slept on a thin mat at night and heard festival music and the crackling of fires as paper money burnt in the streets. Almost never did letters come from home. And the distance filled his heart like a quiet loneliness that would never go away. The sounds and pictures stuck with him even after he got back to America. They made him feel like he was stuck between two worlds that never seemed to fit together. Just as things were getting back to normal, tragedy hit again. Franz's stepmother died in a terrible car accident on a Los Angeles motorway when he was 8 years old. There had only been a short time since the family got back together, and the quick death left wounds that never fully healed. There was an accident on a wet road where her car lost control and hit a truck, killing her instantly. Francis went to the mortuary with his dad to learn more about her body. During that quiet drive, his dad put his arm around his shoulders for a moment he would never forget. The song from the man who raised him was one of the few times it made him feel better. After that day, the house was even less noisy. Every Sunday was filled with church songs, and the rest of the week was full of memories. And Francis didn't talk about how he felt, which made his anger grow in ways he didn't understand. After 3 years, there was another blow that changed everything. Laughs, his father died on his 12th birthday after a short ill health. That day, which should have been a happy one, turned into a sad one. As the man who used to be strong slowly lost his strength, he coughed through sleepless nights, music, until his last breath. No cake or candles were there. There were only sounds from the hospital that were slowly dying away. By the end of the day, he was all by himself, which is something that not many kids ever get to experience. He went from family member to family member, feeling a mix of fear and sadness that he couldn't explain. When I looked back, the pattern didn't seem real. His father died when he was 12 and his mother died when he was born. His stepmother died when he was 8. Each loss took away a little more safety, and faith stopped feeling like a solution and more like a question. He was even more confused after another big surprise in high school. He had become close with his uncle as an adult, but during a fight at home, he lost it and shot his wife before killing himself with the gun. Franz got the news through panicked phone calls. When he got there was police tape and bright lights all around the house. Seeing the body bags being taken away was another picture, music, that wouldn't go away. Before he turned 18, death had been a part of almost every stage of his life. One by one, the faces that should have been his family had gone away, and the quiet that was left behind was rougher than any voice. He was having a hard time because he had questions that wouldn't go away. The missing picture of his mother made him feel empty inside, and nothing could fill that void. When he thought about everything that had happened, the few times his father showed love seemed like nothing. He was often by himself with his thoughts, which kept going back to the same thing. Why was it so easy for life to break music if God cared? He was even more confused because the Buddhist chants he remembered were at odds with the Christian lessons he heard. He felt bitterness and doubt settle in his heart rather quietly. Things finally started to change when I went to college. He turned toward faith instead of music during the years he was sad. And he gave his life to Jesus in a way that surprised even himself. He went to Biola University's Talbot School of Theology and studied hard, determined to learn the truth that had seemed so far away before. After high school, he went to work as a youth leader at a Chadsworth church. Everything looked fine from the outside. He was full of life and energy, and the way he talked to teens made them pay attention. But deep down, he felt split. He taught people to turn away from sin and be pure, but he knew that his own actions did not always fit what he said. The difference between who he was and who he said he was slowly became too much for him to handle. That tension followed him around all day and night until he felt like a stranger in his own body. At some point, he quit his job as a minister without telling anyone. Everyone who knew him thought the change came on quickly. But for him, it had been getting worse for a long time. He got a job as a waiter and swapped his sermon notes for order pads. At work, he learned table numbers instead of Bible verses. Because it was so quiet, he had to slow down and be honest with himself for the first time in years. During that time, he promised himself that he would change how he lived, both in public and in private. At the job that seemed like going backwards, pride fell away and faith started to feel real again. At about the same time, he married Lisa, who would become the most important person in his life. She made a world that had always felt unstable more stable. Still, the first few years of marriage were hard. He fought and misunderstood things because he was sad, which made both of them tired. He was torn between guilt over the past and fear about the future, and there were times when he wondered if the marriage would last. And slowly, they got through the pain together. They learned that faith didn't make things easy, but it did give them the strength to stay. Some of them helped start a small church in Simi Valley in 1994. It was just a few dozen people meeting in a barn. The music room was simple and full of folding chairs and borrowed gear. Still, it felt alive in some way. By the third week, more people had shown up because the word seemed honest and direct. The small group grew so fast that no one saw it coming. The man who used to wait tables was now speaking to a growing crowd with the confidence that comes from having done it before. A lot of people were drawn to those early meetings because they were exciting. Teenagers and young adults crowded into the garage and paid close attention as he talked about destiny and how important faith is. Some people left in tears, while others stayed and asked questions they had never been afraid to ask before. People in the same family didn't always agree on what they heard, but the church kept growing because of the talks. Over the years, the small group grew into a big church with more than 1,000 seats packed inside. At times, it seemed like the progress wasn't real. Still, his teaching never lost its sense of urgency. He, Snorts, talked about giving his all to God and not giving in to comfort. A lot of people changed how they lived in response. In 2004, he started Eternity Bible College with a group of students who were ready to study hard and help others. After that, some of them went abroad to help poor areas. And seeing how dedicated they were made him think of new questions. He started to wonder if a church full of people watching really showed the life Jesus talked about. Even though the church got bigger, he still didn't take a music pay from it. He didn't need much for himself and gave away most of the money he made from speaking and writing books. He gave a lot of the money to groups that help victims of human trafficking because he thought it should be used to change real lives, not just make people feel better. At home, He kept adding to his family until there were 7 kids living there. Lisa taught their children at home and took care of their everyday needs while he preached and traveled. The pressure slowly drained his strength, even though everyone else saw progress. He kept going because everyone thought he would. Still, he often felt tired on the inside. By 2008, his books were being read all over the world and thousands of people went to church every week. In the middle of his success, he had a quiet thought that was bothering him. He thought about whether Jesus or the Apostle Paul would have built something so big and well-equipped, or if they would have picked smaller towns where everyone could contribute. He would sometimes sit alone and think about how having grown and become known might have taken him away from the simplicity he loved before. Over time, those questions got stronger and slowly pushed him to make choices that would change his path again. Franz Chan became famous all over the world all of a sudden in 2008. His book, Crazy Love, went viral faster than he thought it would. It quickly became a New York Times bestseller and went on to sell millions of books. His agent had told him not long before that he could make $1 million in earnings in 1 year. He was scared by the thought. He had prayed for months that God would make him rich. He didn't do it to get rich, he did it to show that Jesus was more important than money by giving away everything, music. He kept his word when the checks finally came. Every dollar went into a secret fund that helped groups in Asia and Africa save children and free women who were being trafficked. He also wouldn't keep anything for himself. He was getting more and more recognition at the same time. Every week, thousands of people packed Cornerstone Church just to hear him speak. Invitations came in from conferences all over the world. It looked like pure success from the outside. But the more well-known he got, the less comfortable he felt inside. There were lots of people there, and the money was real. But he had a bad feeling about it. Comfort and fame made him afraid that they would slowly pull him away from the kind of faith he thought Jesus wanted. He did the opposite of what other famous pastors did, which was to improve their homes and travel in style. He cut the size of his home from 2,000 square feet to about half that size after seeing children in Ugandan poor towns who had almost nothing. A choice that shocked people who thought that being successful would mean having more room and comfort. He wouldn't build a safety net for himself, even when he had a lot of power. Rather than getting paid by the church, he gave away half of his own money. The company Cornerstone did the same thing and gave more than half of its funds to global missions and relief work. There were no fancy trips or expensive cars. In secret, he and his wife gave the money they made from Crazy Love to missions so that their names would not be on the checks. They told him he was going too far, but Sean always pushed back when he talked about it. He asked why following Jesus without any changes seemed strange when Jesus had told people to give up everything and follow him. He became even more sure of many of these beliefs while he was traveling abroad. He lived with orphans in Ecuador and Uganda and held sick kids who didn't make it through the night. He remembered those times for a long time after he got home. He began to dislike the ease of life in the United States, and the big church he led became bigger every year. This way of life cost everyone, even his own family. There was no extra money or long-term protection, they only trusted that God would take care of them. On the other hand, Chan thought that living this way gave his message real weight. He stopped going to church for 3 months in 2008 so he could think and pray. He was very upset by what he saw in American Christianity when he got back. Too many people seemed happy just to listen to lectures and not do much with their faith. It was then that he taught that all believers had spiritual skills that should be used, not kept hidden. He also tried to get people in the church to get together in smaller groups to pray for each other and help instead of just sitting there. Some members said they were healed and that their prayers were heard, but others didn't like the changes. People stopped coming for a while. But those who stayed became more dedicated. John thought that the church should send people out into the world to do service instead of keeping them inside. A lot of the time, he used underground churches in China as an example of strong faith that didn't need big events or expensive buildings. He started Eternity Bible College while it was still part of Cornerstone a long time before this change. By the late 2000s, the school had taught music to dozens of students who then went on to work in dangerous mission fields around the world. Chan went to Ecuador to see some of them and walked into mountain towns where graduates baptized new Christians in rivers and preached even though they were afraid of being hurt. They were brave in the face of disease and danger, and it made him feel something deep inside. People were happy about how well the college was doing, but Sean told no one that he sometimes wished he could go to one of those small churches where everyone knew each other and had a role to play. His own church had thousands of people. She felt like they were just another face in the crowd, not a part of a family. This made him nervous. He began to think more and more about whether his growing impact was actually getting in the way of the kind of church life he cared about. On April 18, 2010, those questions, about the music, finally came to the surface. His announcement